We're podcasting live out of Marion Ranch Records. You can go ahead and like and subscribe our YouTube channel. There you can just type in Faith and Whatever into the search, and we should come up there. Also, within the coming days, you'll be able to find us on other podcast aggregates like iTunes. And then if you want, you can like in our page on Facebook at facebook.com/Faith and Whatever. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep right on moving here. James, I do believe you are up. You were the supplier of the religion discussions this time. So what do you have for us?
Yes, I was. And this was a conversation I wasn't going to bring up. And then when I told Josh about the one I wasn't going to bring up, he was like, you have to bring that up, because we argued about it for about 30 minutes.
I love it. I love it.
So I was watching a show that I'm not going to give credit to, but it was a show that follows businesses, and it was following a major chain, and this major chain had a location, like a food chain.
Can we not say the name of the food chain on air? Is that probably better to avoid legal issues?
I don't know. Criticize it.
Sure.
So this major food chain, think like national, if not international food chain, had a location built into a church.
Seen that episode.
Okay. And I wanted to discuss whether you all think that's mixing kingdoms, mixing mission.
So define for us what that is. If somebody's listening may not understand the term mixing kingdoms there.
Well, obviously, the church is a physical embodiment of God's kingdom, which exists on earth and in heaven. And when we operate as the church, we're operating as an offshoot of that kingdom, as part of that kingdom, with God as king and his will being part of our mission, his mission being our mission.
Right.
Now, if you have another corporate body, to use that term, that corporate body has its interest. If it's a company, they want to make money, and they want to usually bottom line things, and I'm not necessarily criticizing that, generally speaking, but does that fit into the mission of the church? Should the church confuse those things? I have strong feelings about this. I am not a big fan. And to be fair, it seemed to me, although I couldn't tell from the whole episode, it seemed to me that this fast food chain was maybe working in conjunction with that church, maybe to provide jobs to that local area. So there are positives here. I'm not going to sit and pretend there's no positives. Mm-hmm. But ultimately speaking, I'm not a big fan of mixing kingdoms, mixing what God's kingdom is and what the goals of God's kingdom is with the interests of other major bodies. And that's my opinion. I'll jump in later. What do you think, Garrett? I know what Josh thinks. He's wrong. But what do you think, Garrett?
My first response is that that's pretty creative and pretty progressive, and probably pretty good and relevant to reaching new people to get them in the church. But the more that I think about it, and kind of this episode in particular, you're signing a contract with a large company that has their own issues and their own concerns, so that could be kind of conflicting to what you want to do. So I'll give another small example. There's a church in Michigan that had a coffee shop that would be open all week long, and instead of staffing that with church volunteers and church staff, they were just going to sublease that out to a coffee shop. They just came in and opened a business in there. But this was the only coffee shop they owned. It was a Christian family, and they ran it probably with Christian values. So I think if you have some control over kind of your contractual agreement of the purpose and the vision and the value of bringing this in here, then I think there could be some really cool partnerships in that. But just bringing in like a Sunglass Hut to your church just because you want to like give people jobs, like I don't really know if that has value. But bringing in, partnering with somebody, I mean at church now you walk through campus all week long and it's pretty empty most of the time. Yeah. And imagine some kind of career training for people who wouldn't be able to get a job otherwise, some opportunities for people to not just provide income but places to meet, third spaces, places for relations to happen, fellowship to happen. I like that idea of it, but again, I kind of agree with you that there's conflicting issues when you as a church are signing an agreement with a national company or just a large company that has their own issues and is probably just financial.
Yeah, and to clarify before Josh jumps in with his his differing perspective. I am not at odds with the idea of a church starting its own businesses to give out jobs and running them according to the church's values and keeping it an intra-church mission using business in that way. I think it could be done well. I can see how mistakes could happen, but mistakes can happen with any kind of ministry. So I'm okay with that. I once heard of a church basically purchasing like a small mall area so they could build it back up, open up businesses that were Christian run, and then give those jobs to like bolster the lives and the economic situation of that community. That sounds awesome to me, as long as it's done well. But this was definitely like a major franchise company that the church was wedding in this one scenario. And this is where I see a line. Josh has a differing perspective.
Yeah, I yes and no. I mean, at first when we were initially talking about it, right, we couldn't have been more polar opposites in terms of where.
I was
where
choking
we were
you. No,
but this idea, I don't have a problem with this in theory. Even at a major chain like that store was.
Even a sunglass hut.
Even a sunglass hut.
All right.
I think it's awesome when the purpose is expressly to be able to provide socioeconomic mobility for people who may or may not have access to it otherwise. Ronald Sider talks about a lot of the stuff in churches that make a difference. One of his books that was big, and I like the concept of really partnering even with other kingdom-minded entities for the sake of the gospel. Paul talks about that in Philippians 1, right? Some people preach Christ out of envy or strife or jealousy or whatever, and he says, what do I care? As long as Christ gets proclaimed, that's good. So even if the motives at the heart of the company are different, I'm okay with that. However, we did come to this idea where it made me a little bit more uncomfortable when James began to shed light on the idea of the context being a gentleman who had owned several other ones, right? And so somebody who's coming in to open up a shop like that just to kind of get the bargain or the deal there, that makes me more skeptical of the person than the idea in and of itself. So I agree and disagree at the same time, right? I don't have the same initial discomfort with the fast food chain coming in. If we have a fantastic burger chain in SoCal and now spreading all throughout the area called In-N-Out, right? And if In-N-Out wanted to open a store inside my church, I would be all for it, for that kind of thing, because of what it does for people. So as long as, I guess, the idea, even if it's a national fast food chain, is coming in to help, right, for the sake of social economic mobility, then I'm 100% in, and I'm all down for that.
See, what James is bringing up is that, and I like, is that this company has to make a profit, and that in and of itself can kind of conflict with what you're trying to offer to the community through this partnership, right? Mm-hmm. So as a church, if you open up a business, so you open up your own burger joint in a church and you staff it, I would imagine you want to hire someone to do that, because most pastors probably don't know how to cook burgers and or run a burger joint. But let's say your goal is not to profit, but to just break even with your expenses, but then offer all these services to your community, whether it's jobs, places to meet, just healthy food or whatever it is. The fact that maybe your concern isn't you don't have investors who are concerned with just making more money. You won't have to make as many sacrifices with the way that you run your company, treat people, what you offer, the value and the price of your food.
Yeah, but we're still certainly assuming some things are on the table about the type of person that's opening that investment. I'm even okay with the for-profit business coming in there. I don't know what the legalities of mixing a for-profit and a nonprofit are. I don't even know if you can do that and still maintain your nonprofit status as a church, which is a topic for another day, right? But I am okay with that even initially, because the people, I'm assuming, if we're talking in this community, the prices at that fast food chain are very reasonable, very affordable. Nothing's crazy over the top expensive there. It's something that allows for good conversation there, and it packs the campus during the week in a way that it wouldn't have otherwise, sure, like you were talking about. And so for me, even the mixing of the non and the for-profit businesses is worth what you get out of that, is totally worth the chances that you have to take. And again, this is all predicated on the person being like a good, decent, honest person. Like, I would be far more comfortable to do it with a member from my church, right? If somebody was like, hey, we want to buy this Subway, put it in, we'll do the hiring and handle that, and we want to work specifically with people who need help.
It was a Subway now?
What's that?
Nothing.
And so, I want to put that in, and I want to be able to do that, or whatever kind of store we want to put in there. It doesn't have to, it can be anything. And so, I would be okay with that. And we had kind of talked about the location of it, right? Does it have to be in the church, or does it have to be across the street? Or can it be across the street? And I was reflecting on that, and I would want it in the church. And there, I've actually kind of.
You've backpedaled?
Yeah, backpedaled on that stance. I would want it in the church there if I'm specifically partnering with somebody from my church, just because it's less distance to walk, right? And it makes it easier. I mean, people are literally coming into your doors there, and that's every pastor's dream. Yeah. There, I'd love to talk with 1 million people if they would come to me there, right. And so it's the going to them part that gets difficult and tedious at times. It's still worth every trip, but. So if there's an opportunity like that to engage in conversation and dialogue with people, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think potentially I like the idea of just getting, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, just getting creative and thinking about a way to get people on campus. I know that at my current church, we'd love to have a coffee shop that we run open. We're right across here from my high school. So, I mean, not necessarily open all day, but especially open after school. Mm-hmm. People to come students to come over. We're pretty close to a large state university. It'd be great to have it open late so students can come and study or whatever, just to get them there and offer them a service similar to what they would get at a restaurant or things like that.
Yeah. See, my preference would be, let's say you wanted to do this. The way I see it being done is opening a place that provides food either very cheap or free, hiring somebody as a pastor to run it as a ministry, inviting all these places. They want their tax break from it, that's fine, but inviting them to donate to it. That's what I see as an appropriate model there, achieving many of similar things, although maybe not hiring people, or as many people, at least in this case, right? But what that is that's a fully God's kingdom focused approach, whereas doing it the other way, we're kind of splitting the focus. Right, this business needs to be a well-run business that makes its money, as well as we want to run our ministry. And now we're partnering towards separate interests. And I don't know, I feel very, very odd about mixing goals.
Yeah, but even those things can be run hand in hand, because if the business is run well, that reflects well of the church.
But that doesn't happen every time, right?
Yeah, I don't think just because it's a national chain and they're profitable, that doesn't necessarily mean that they treat their employees well and that.
Right, and this again comes down to the hypotheticals, right? Which I haven't seen the episode you guys are actually talking about, so I don't know who the business person was or the legitimacy of kind of their claims and what have you. But in theory, right, if we're talking about an upstanding person there, it's a great idea. It really, really is a great idea, because we're just harnessing what's already existent out in the world, and we don't even have to put in the creativity side of the aspect of coming up with these things. We already have a vessel and a vehicle that's ready, that just needs to be driven. And if we can drive it, that cuts out half the time, half the prep, half the ability to do the fundraising or whatever, and we can just go. But for me, the issue is far more centered around the individual and the class of that person who wants to run it, and then the socioeconomic mobility. Those are the two. I
think you're going halfway there and you're missing it. For example, let's say a large church, you want a coffee shop, so you bring in a Starbucks instead of doing your own.
Sure.
I think you're like, man, you almost got there, because what if it was your own? Then your coffee could be, literally, your coffee could come from an outreach mission organization in South America.
Sure.
Central America. We're like, every coffee cup we sell, we're double giving, because not only are you giving to the church, and any profit we make will go back into mission work, the coffee we supply is from a missionary whose only job in Central America is to reach out to farmers.
But see, here's the difference with that, though, is you're approaching that from the perspective of it being your vision. If this is not my vision as a pastor or as somebody who has the time, the energy, or the efforts to do that, and somebody comes to me with that approach, if they want to start their own thing and they can on campus, great, that's awesome. But even having something like that, whatever chain that comes in there, would be better to me than doing nothing there. And because if they don't have the time or the energy to go and find all of those resources, now this would again get us into the ethical dilemma of like, where is this place getting their food? How are they sourcing, the ethical treatment? So I'm willing to sit down and answer all those questions and still decide, is it better or is it not better? And if they can't farm their stuff reasonably or ethically, in my opinion, and I would be the arbiter of the ethical understanding of that, then we don't do it. But
yeah. to the point you made just a moment ago about, well, maybe the minister, it's not his vision or her vision, and he doesn't have the time and resources to build the coffee shop from the ground up, but this outside company comes and offers it.
Well, if I have to be a person, not a company, though.
Well, that person's representing a company,
sure,
right? So my problem being James Ewell, is I am immediately suspicious. Why does blank company want to come to my church?
It's a bit cynical.
I am a bit cynical. I'll admit that. That's fine. It's served me well in other contexts. I would be immediately suspicious. That's the problem. So because now it's even worse than my idea. It's not my mission. It's not my church's mission. You guys have some idea, and you're trying to bring it, and I don't use the word invade, but the idea is you're trying to sort of interlude or
carve out a niche
into our space, into our sanctuary.
But you would certainly be able to vet that person and trust your sensibilities of that person's trustworthiness or lack thereof, right? I mean, you would feel that way about your own character reading abilities.
It would, if this was the first meeting, it would take a heck of a long time.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't do that though. I wouldn't. It wouldn't be I wouldn't be okay with somebody random.
A rando?
Coming in. No. It would have to be somebody from my congregation there. But so, bottom line is, I'm right, and we can conclude that forcibly.
Somewhere in there, someone's right.
Of course,
me.
It's two against one on this table.
Yeah, two people can be wrong. Martin Luther was right, and he had the whole Catholic Church against him.
I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle.
More towards my middle, for sure.
I mean, maybe because I like internet, and that would be really cool in a church.
It would be pretty fantastic.